Gonna have a little bit of fun today. I think I'll paint something using what I like to call the drop wash technique, and it involves wetting the paper and then dropping paint in and allowing it to find its level and then working with whatever emerges. Now it's quite important in this first stage that you lay your board flat so the paint doesn't run about too much. Now last time I demonstrated this technique I painted a winter scene. I'm going to paint something a little bit more fitting to the time of year here in the Northern Hemisphere, and so I'll do something a little bit more summery, get some bright colours in there, some bright blues and greens. So I've wet the paper all over with the mist bottle. I've allowed the little bees to stay there as well because it can create some interesting effects, and I've laid in some ultramarine and cobalt blue, and I'm allowing it just to run around, go wherever it wants. And I've just picked up some cobalt blue as well. Let's drop some of that into the sky area. Let's get some cloud colour in there. So I'll pick up a little bit of Payne's grey, mix that in with the blue. Now the paint's fairly wet, so it fills the belly of the brush. Then I'll just squeeze the brush and move the brush while I'm squeezing it and allow that paint just to drop basically wherever it lands. Let's touch a little bit of light red in with the Payne's grey as well. And same again, fill the belly of the brush and then squeeze and move the brush around and allow it to land wherever it wants. But now I'll just pick up this natural hairbrush. I'm not sure what the hair of the brush is, but I can drag that paint around now. Mix some of it together, let it mix on the paper. So creating some cloud shapes with basically wherever the paint lands, and then drag it around. Try and find an interesting sky amongst all of that mess. It's quite a nice way to work though, really, especially if you're a little bit stuck for ideas. Drop some paint on, see where it lands, and then try and make something out of it. So let's pick up a little bit of ultramarine and some light red. Mix it up a little bit darker. I can drag some of that straight in. Hopefully that form maybe a little bit of a distant hill or a distant tree line. A bit of cobalt blue in there as well. And now I can manipulate that a little bit with the brush and drag that from side to side. Already some interesting shapes starting to happen when the paint lands and it hits that water on the paper and moves around. Let's get some raw sienna now, and I can start getting a little bit of colour down in the land. A little bit more raw sienna. Let's touch a bit of cadmium yellow into that as well. Now again, the paint's quite wet, so I can just lay that in, let it land wherever it lands, and touch a bit of burnt sienna in there now as well. A bit more cadmium yellow. And let's go back into this big soft brush, fan the hairs out on the brush as well. I can again manipulate some of this paint, drag it all together, mixing it all on the paper. So I've got an instant field there with a lot of variation in the colour. Now there's some puddling happening on that paper, so I can tilt the board, allow some of that to run around. And tip it back the other way as well. Might make some interesting effects. Okay, I'm going to tilt the board at a little bit of an angle now, so I've just prop it up with a roll of masking tape behind the board, and now allow that paint to run down, and I'm going to allow this to dry naturally, so I'll leave it for half an hour or so, I think. Well, I've allowed that to fully dry, and some really nice interesting effects. I particularly like the way the sky has dried. It's a little bit of granulation down in the land as well, some interesting little shapes, and I can work with these now. So I'm going to paint some trees over the top. So let's bring in a little bit more water with the mist bottle. Let's mix up some colour for some trees. So I've got some blue and some cadmium yellow. I'm going to go quite bold, I think. Let's touch a little bit of burnt sienna in there as well. Let's mix up a few little wells of some green paint. And using the same technique as before. So create some interesting shapes and then I'll work with those. Let's touch a bit of raw sienna into this mixture. So I still want to get variation every time I go back, so it's going to that burnt sienna mixture that I had there in the well. A little bit more cadmium yellow, more raw sienna, and a little bit of chromium green oxide as well. And so there's some semi-opaque colours in there. That's gone a little bit thick there, but let's just grab that soft natural hairbrush again and I can manipulate that, move it around, try and find a tree shape out of all these drips of paint that I've got on the paper. So again, mixing it all together on the paper. I think I'll just mop up where it ran down there across the land. I don't necessarily want that little bit, so just a little bit of paper towel, mop that up. Let's go back into some cadmium yellow, some more of that chromium green. And same again, just drop some paint on the paper. A little bit of burnt sienna in there now, a bit of ultramarine as well, a little bit more of that chromium green. A little bit of dark paint there in the palette as well. I think I'll grab that, it's left over from a previous painting. And pick up that soft brush again. Dab that paint around, again mixing it all together. Quite a light touch. And just blend all the shapes together. Can use some of the paint that's gathered in the brush as well, and add another little tree shape on the left there, a few little areas of texture. Now I've just picked up this old calligraphy brush. It's a really tired old brush, taken a lot of punishment, but it should give me some interesting marks across the land. So I've got some more raw and burnt sienna, a little bit of cadmium yellow. I'm just bringing a tiny little bit of water with a mist bottle all the way across the bottom there. I can drag some of this paint around now. Tie the trees in to the land as I go. Let's just try and suggest, I think, a few grasses. There's some of that dark paint there. Touch a bit of burnt sienna into that. Let's get some shadow in these trees as well. And so looking at how these shapes are emerging, how they're drying, whether I can add some shadows in there. Just touch some ultramarine into that dark mixture. Again, drag that around and tie all these shapes together. And it's quite a nice way to work like this, just dropping the paint on the paper. You never really know where it's going to go. You don't know what shapes are going to emerge, so it's quite nice to really, especially if you're stuck for ideas, then just drop some paint on, use a mist bottle as well maybe, and move the paint around, see what emerges, and then use your imagination and create some shapes. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, to be honest with you, but if you work on the back of an old painting especially, you've got nothing to lose. Let's drag some more texture across the land. I'm getting little bits of dry brush happening down there as well. I want to make sure I don't cover up too much of that first wash either, because there's quite a nice glow to that. I want to try and keep a good element of that. Let's mix up some really quite strong dark now, so some ultramarine and some burnt sienna. You can start bringing up some branches and tree trunks. The whole time I'm working very quickly really and very loosely. I mean, obviously by dripping paint onto the paper, it's loose to start off with, so there's no point in trying to tighten up and paint anything too defined. So keep all the brush strokes very loose, very quick. And looking where I can add a little mark and a little shape to try and balance the composition. Don't want too much light or dark on either side. Let's go back into that soft brush and touch a bit of dark in and around these trees. I think the trick is now to bring it all together by adding a certain element of shadow and dark. Now I've just swapped to a synthetic brush and I'm going to lift out some of this paint that I added in there for that dark tree trunk. I think it looked a little bit too dark, it needs a light element I think in that tree, so I'm using a thirsty brush to mop up some of that dark paint and add the suggestion of a couple of little highlights here and there. Let's go back into the sable brush. I'll pick up some Payne's grey I think, and a little bit of that chromium green, a little touch of raw sienna and cadmium yellow, a little bit of burnt sienna as well. And let's get some dark in this tree. And now where I just lifted out there, I can cut around that, and hopefully that give the impression that there's a tree trunk in there catching a little bit of light. Let's just modify the shape of these trees as well and get some suggestion of some leaves and tiny little bits of texture and things happening at the top of these trees, and overall really trying to create a pleasing shape. Let's touch some of that same colour down into the land as well. Let's grab a little bit more burnt sienna and ultramarine. Mix that up quite dark. And let's get some strong dark shadow towards the base of the trees. Trees more often than not are darker towards the bottom than they are at the top. A little bit more ultramarine in there. Just vary the darks a little bit as well. Let's get a bit of Payne's grey and some burnt sienna. Mix that up very dark. It's pretty much black. I wouldn't often mix my darks out of Payne's grey, I should say, but when I do this kind of painting, I don't mind. It's a very quick option. So getting some really strong, juicy dark down at the base of these trees, and I can lay some of that in to the land as well. Again, very loosely, very quickly applied. Now allowing the paint to break up on the paper as well, so I get that little bit of dry brush, so I'm not completely covering up that first wash. Let's just try and make these trees look a little bit more three-dimensional with some dark shadow areas. And now I think we're almost there. I think I need some highlights and a few more branches in these trees. So I'll just grab an old palette knife and let's scratch out some little branches and some twigs. Oh, the palette knife just broke there, so let's get rid of that. I'll pick up a piece of plastic card. And let's scratch out a few more little branches, a few little shapes, little highlights here and there. And that adds to the sense of three dimensions as well, kind of makes the tree look a little bit more 3D. So a few little, scratch out a few little areas right down in the foreground as well, a couple of little bits of grass catching the light. Let's go back into with the calligraphy brush and pick up some more Payne's Grey, a little bit more burnt sienna. And again, very thick dark paint now. This is all still tiny little bit wet, so I need to make sure the paint's quite a lot drier than the paint that's already on the paper. So mix the paint up very dark and very thick, and I should be able to lay that on without it running. And let's get the impression of some little branches, so some coming out the top of the tree. I don't want to make sure really that I don't do too much of this kind of stuff. It can make everything seem a little bit too busy, so just a few here and there in each tree. A few more little darks at the base of the tree as well, little bits of grass. Let's have a big branch coming up there. I think I'll continue the shape of the trunk up through the middle of this tree, very simply. I'm just looking to see if I need to do any more, and I think that'll do. Okay, so painting finished. I used the drop wash technique for this, which is quite a nice technique, especially if you want that spontaneous feel and you're not quite sure really what you want to paint. If you drop paint on, allow it to find its own level. You can drag it around with a brush as well and try and find interesting shapes within there. Dry that off and then add some more shapes over the top for some trees. Again, drop the paint on fairly randomly and then you can move it around and try and find shapes within the shapes that emerge, if that makes sense. But it's a very fun technique to do anyway. And if you've never done it before, then practice on the back of an old painting, something that doesn't really matter, then you're not losing anything and you can just relax and enjoy it. And really that's where the magic happens in a way. But anyway, I hope you liked the demonstration. If you did, send me a comment and give the video a like and all that kind of thing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Also, I've got an exclusive video over on Patreon every week, so if you're not a member over there, then do head over there and check that out. There's like a really nice little community and people ask me questions and they send me their photos for painting and all that kind of thing, so do check that out. But anyway, thanks for watching everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.